Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here and to be speaking to you. I come from a different world. This is not my world here. This is not the culture I'm used to. But I was invited to come specifically for this stream of sustainable futures, and I want to wait for my presentation to come, which I'm sure is going to be there in a moment. And whatever, I will start in the meantime with, here we go. Here it is. No, we were there. I'm here to talk about building regenerative cultures. And I'm very happy for the talk we just heard, because it really just goes very well together. It just brings another lens to the whole matter. But before we dive into that, I want to introduce this guy to you, Sebastião Salgado. He's a Brazilian photographer, and he died 4 days ago, last Friday, with the age of 81. He was a photographer who got very famous for taking pictures of human cruelties, of war zones, of massacres, and so on. And after he had been in Rwanda and witnessing some of the genocide that was happening there in the 90s, he got so sick emotionally and physically because he felt so ashamed of being part of the human race after what he had witnessed. And so he retreated to the farm of where he grew up in Brazil, to his parents. But unlike what he expected to find a lush rainforest, he found depleted land, stripped soils, and he was a bit put aback. But that, in the end, fostered his decision to be wanting to give back to nature, because he had seen so much atrocities of what human beings are capable of, that he learned how to regenerate ecosystems in a very quick way, and with his wife planted millions of trees and regenerated the whole place, so that a couple of years later it looked like this. This is the same place, and you can zoom out, and it's a very vast strip of land. This is just a fraction of this land, of what he had done in such a short time. So this is possible. It's not that many people are doing it, but we know that this is currently really what we need in our world, and we need it for the land. Our ecosystems are in quite some peril. But the question is, can we just hope and expect some people to undergo such terrible things like witnessing what Sebastião witnessed, the atrocities that he saw, so that people say, I'm going to dedicate my life for making this a better place? Or what can we do to get people to care more? I have learned from this regeneration, and I think, and this is my hypothesis, that we do not only need regenerating land in order to get to that place in order to get to the place where we regenerate land, but what we also need is that we find back to regenerating our social systems, because we are lacking of care for each other. We are lacking of care for the bigger and greater systems that we're in. And so, with that in mind, I co-founded some years ago an organization. We call ourselves Reinventing Society. That's us. And we were wondering, inspired by solarpunk, by the way, so how do regenerative social systems look like? And regenerative can equally be replaced by thriving, healing, restoring, blooming, lively systems. So how can we design them, and how do they look like? And we started off with this, what solarpunk often does. It shows pictures of, okay, this is the world today, and this is how the world could look like in a regenerative future. So we worked with, or we still work with municipalities and take pictures and work on them and show like, okay, here's Lausanne today, this is how it could look like. Is that not attractive to you? Doesn't that somehow spark something in you? But on the long run, we also figured inspiration is great, it's not enough though. If we want to change a system, we might need to look deeper, and I want to say it with Donella Meadows, who's a system thinker, a researcher who has really gone deep into how do we bring about systemic change. And one of the key insights she's had, or what she's shared with us, is that the most powerful leverage point, if we want to change a system, and we're speaking social system, also true for others, but social system here, is the changing the dominant mindset and paradigms. That is key if we want to make the most fundamental change. Paradigm being something like a capitalistic paradigm, that's a paradigm, and the respective mindsets. So that's big, that's quite big, and that's not very tangible. So as an organization, we said, okay, what can we do to break this down? How can we bring this a bit more into say, building blocks? And we said we're going to look for regenerative principles. That seems a bit more tangible. And with these principles, we are going to experiment, and we will not only do this in our organization, we will also do this in our social ecosystems around us. And we have done so, and we've done it also in events. We've done it with other organizations and so on, and in our workshops. And I want to share with you some of these principles, saying, though, that these principles are just what we found. This is our experimentation. And the key thing here is it's a lot of fun. It's quite some effort to experiment with them. But it's quite nice to be building your own culture. This is one to start with, and it's quite a useful one, because if you just put a sheet of paper and say, okay, these are our principles and this is how we're going to live like, this is empty paper if you don't live it. So practice what you preach is a very useful principle to start off, that you're actually trying to be like, okay, we're going to embody what we talk about. We're going to show the world that we actually mean it. And we're just going to choose principles that we actually want. And if we don't want to live them, then we just ditch them. Another one is to follow the inspiration. That means we wanted to go away from this, you gotta always do what you have to do, to this, like we follow what we really feel inspired for and we want to do it. And I tell you, it's a great principle, but it's tough to embed into a culture where you work and where a lot of stuff has to be done, and many people are like, yep, I don't want to do it, it's not fun. So you need to find a way, but that's another story. I don't want to go too deep into this one. There's cooperation and symbiosis. We said from the get-go, we don't want to go too much into competitive attitude. We will focus on other partners. We will look for people, for organizations, for allies with whom we can cooperate and thrive and find symbioses. Self-responsibility and self-inquiry is one that aims at get your shit together with your own quirks. So we all have our personalities, we all develop into some kind of humans, and we shouldn't make other people suffer from that. So it means to actually really look into what makes me and how to annoy other people, and take responsibility for that and inquire into that. That's a challenging one, but it's quite rewarding to embrace conflict. There are studies that show like the most hindrance for work, the reason why a lot of shit is not being done is that people have conflicts and that they are not being really worked out, that people just are annoyed and frustrated and they don't find ways to express that in a healthy way. So embracing conflicts, meaning finding good spaces, how you can sort things out, is essential, and we found this to be one of the most challenging but also most beautiful principles. Always zooming out to see, is what we're doing actually still useful for what's happening. Just in the past couple of years, we've seen so many changes around the world. Like all our systems are crumbling and falling apart and changing ever faster. So to zoom out once in a while and to check, are we still doing what makes sense, or has the world changed actually, it's a no-brainer, but at the same time, many people don't do it very often. And so I can highly recommend to zoom out once in a while. And we also wanted to make sure we're not just talking about regenerating nature, we actually are going to nature, so our offsites are usually happening there. And we've also found that we don't want to live in a very, or work in a very linear fashion, but that there are cycles, that there are among us also the women with our menstruational cycles that brings in a typical cyclical movement in work, but also that there are seasonal cycles and so on, as well as that we wanted to use products that are designed in a circular fashion. So I want to zoom in one or two of these principles, because it's still a principle, it's still yet not so easy to grasp, from paradigm to mindset to principles to, so how do you actually do that? I want to highlight this one. This, by the way, is an AI interpretation and me and my colleague fighting, going into conflict. And we do that every now and then because we actually have a lot of tension with each other and we resolve that a lot. That's a lot of the work we need to do. And I want to just share one example of a real conflict that was there. So we are co-leads in our organization since a year after reshuffling our board. And we are technically equal in this, in being co-leads. But over time it showed I didn't have the capacity so much to take the responsibility that I wanted to take. And he had more capacity. So he would take up more responsibility. And over time, he was trying to take more responsibility, and also, but he felt hindered by me because I felt like he was kind of starting to be a bit more authoritarian, a rigid leadership kind of style. And I was like, oh my God, I need to stop this guy from wanting too much. So we started to have a tension there, and so we wanted to sort it out. And the way we did this was that we, first of all, and that's crucial, if you can still do it, if you're not so far that you're so, I hate you, but that you are still in this place where you can be like, you know what, I do very much value you. We have our conflict, and my God, am I annoyed of you, but I can still see your, like, the contribution you make, I can still see you very much as a valuable human being, and I'm very happy we have a relationship. And once you do that, that sets a very good ground that you step out of this role and be like, okay, and now we go into the next phase, because that's the fun part. This is where you start to rant and steam release. So that means that you, in a deliberate fashion, and not just from out of nowhere, you're like, okay, we're doing this now. You go there and then you rant and you really be like, okay, you know what I don't like about what you're doing here, and this and that and that and that. And then he goes and I sit and I just get to listen, and it gets me boiling. So I have another round, and so we go back and forth. And over time, once we have less of this steam sitting inside us, we can find and come to a place where we start to recognize, okay, it's not only that you suck. I also have my sides in this, and in our case of this conflict we had, there is like, okay, you know what, I'm also realizing that I wanted to take more responsibility, and I really don't like that I cannot. And I'm putting this on you. I'm making your life hard by trying to block you there. I have other reasons too, but this is my side in the whole conflict. So to start to see that and to acknowledge, you know what, and I know this has nothing to do with you. This is my personal conditioning and where I come from. And when you do that, you find more understanding for misunderstanding, which means, okay, this is where you're coming from in the first place. Like I'm starting to see how we could misunderstand each other. Like I'm starting to see you were trying to serve the organization here. I was also trying to serve the organization and our cause. But my God, we really got into each other's ways. So when you start to see that, eventually you can get to the point which is very much then regenerating in that sense, where you can show, you know what, it's hard to admit, but I do actually am challenged by you being able to hold more responsibility. I feel ashamed, I cannot. I would like to, but I don't have the capacities at the moment. And if you can share such vulnerabilities, and that comes really only at the end, because then you can show yourself vulnerably, then you reconnect. And you can connect in a deeper fashion than you could before. And that's the magnificent side of conflicts. It also brings another challenge with it, or another, let's say, necessity, which is why I want to zoom into this other one here, self-responsibility and self-inquiry. Because what I already mentioned in this conflict, when you start to see, okay, I have my own side in this, then you kind of need to understand what's going on inside of you and how you can change what you're doing there. It just not necessarily helps to only talk about it. So this principle requires a few key concepts, 3 to be precise, to be understood. One is that of conscious and unconscious, just to be aware and to understand how we are having so much mental load that we don't know about. We have a lot of quirks, a lot of weirdnesses, a lot of baggage that is in our own way. So whenever we are challenged in life, we can assume there is something in our unconscious that is making life more difficult for us. And that becomes particularly tricky when it comes to trauma, which is that we all faced hurts, and especially when we were young. Trauma is something that we store. They are experiences that is just too much by the time we experience it. And trauma does not necessarily mean it's not a single event, a very brutal single event, which some people think is the only way of trauma. But trauma actually has very complex definitions and is very broad, has very broad characteristics. And I actually don't know any person who does not have some type of developmental trauma, meaning having gone through a hardship of growing up, which was in some way too hard and has developed some types of weirdnesses around it. And then from trauma come projections, and that's also very good to know. We just had that in the example I shared. Projection means I don't like something about myself, but I'm not really realizing that, so I'm going to put it on someone else. So it means the other way around. You don't like someone, and you're really like, oh my God, I'm so triggered by that person. That's a projection. That's an information about you, and much less an information about that person. So in this case of what I shared, this was an information about myself I didn't like. I felt ashamed. I couldn't take the responsibility I wanted to. When you know that, you can do shadow work, how it's called. Shadow work means a lot. I'm just going to share a few buzzwords here. I don't want to go too much into that, but my God, it's so useful to do. That can be therapy, that can be arts and music. You can go for coaching, meditation, spiritual practice, self-reflection practices, self-inquiry workshops. There are a lot of that. Altered states of consciousness. I'm sure some of you have experimented with that. Hypnosis, relationship work, somatic work, imaginations, constellation work, and so on and so forth. There is plenty. There's so much out there. I've tried them all. They are really worth it. And it's so amazing to be doing that work. It pays off after time to be doing this shadow work, but because you're just not standing in your own way as much as you would if you don't do this self-inquiry. It comes down to this: own your emotional baggage. Don't annoy the people around you, but find out what are your characteristics that make the lives of others harder and make your own life much harder. And with these two, I want to go to a third one, and with that I want to end, which is, again, seeing the bigger picture. And that involves also us here, seeing the bigger picture. In our case, seeing the bigger picture to once more refer to the conflict I depicted. Not only did we realize we had some antagonism there, but I realized after some time, oh my God, I'm so against you. I really want to stop you from taking over more power and leadership in our organization. Why is that? I feel like I need to stop you. And we did some inquiry and found out that as we're Germans, both of us, we also ran a collective pattern. Because in Germany, as you might know, we had in the last century, in the 30s and 40s, we had a leader who was kind of crazy and nuts and led people into frenzy and led to mass murders. And that's still, it's still stored in our unconscious. We call it collective and transgenerational trauma. It's something that runs over generations and over generations. And in Germany, many people are very, very skeptical of people who are trying to get into more power. So this is a collective wound we're carrying. And this was what also played out. And it's amazing to see that and to find out and be like, okay, you can tell that other people and be like, guys, we are running on patterns here that are so not serving us anymore. But it's good to depict that, and it's not just our individual bullshit. But also, for building regenerative cultures, I think that our current cultures, and that being the ones that are very widespread, say national cultures, as they used to be, the societal cultures that are big and vast, they're crumbling, they're not really holding anymore. We are in a world that is so fastly changing that it's useful to start using our own building blocks for a world and the world we want to create, like we just had it in the keynote that was given before. Because our regular, say, mainstream cultures, they are falling into the traps of social separation. They are coming to this point of being like, it's a lot of us versus them thinking. It's like they are the evil ones, we're the good guys, and so on. But this is a trap. That's not going to bring us to a flourishing and regenerative culture. And so I also believe that the time is really over for passive hope, meaning to just hope it's going to get better. They're going to solve it. I don't have to do anything. I just want to embrace once more, follow the inspiration, but also follow the inspiration from a point where you're zoomed out and be like, okay, what does the world need and what is my contribution to it? Times have changed, just over the last 5 years especially. We have changed a lot, and the world has changed a lot, and it's not going to stop. So I invite you to look how you can build regenerative cultures, and maybe in these days where everything is so mad, these could also be called islands of sanity. And where do you start? How do you start building your culture? Well, ask yourself, what are your principles? I've shared mine. What are the principles that you like to run on? And what are the cultures that you like to create? How can you experiment with these principles and bring them into a concrete action? What would be your culture that would be worth striving for and that you would like to build? And then you go and build culture. Thank you very much for your attention.